Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Free Kick podcast. Today we are discussing the midfield line. It is a very, very big line with one very, very big name player to talk about. I'm very excited to get into it, but first of all, let's introduce my co-host for today's episodes. I've got with me Will and Liam. How you guys going?
Going well, thanks, Jono.
I'm thinking about cash. Thinking about money. This is the dollar bill episode.
It is a very, very expensive one. I think this is probably going to be a large money sink. And look, let's just take stock of what sort of players we're looking at here. We are looking at 175 different midfield options here. It's a third of all players in the game. And very interestingly, nearly half of all of our rookies here. I think there are 28 rookie-priced players. So a lot of value to be had, but also a lot of big spenders. When we're talking about the highest averages in the game, they are coming from the midfield line. From last season, there was one player, Ebony Marinoff, who came in with an average of 145 plus. It is the largest average we have ever seen in the AFLW Fantasy world. It's truly incredible, and it was anchored by a score early on last season of 191 in round 2. Actually incredible. The highest averaging line by far across all of them, we're talking about 32 different midfielders that are priced 80 or above, any of which would pretty much find themselves in the top 1 or 2 on any other line. But yet again, with that skinny top end, there is only one player priced over 140, one over 130, 120, 113. It is a big, big drop-off from first to second. Let's talk about Ebony Marinoff. I think this is the real question of the season. Do we need to have her in our sides?
It's for me, I think you have to. And I think it is because of that cliff. When we have captaincies on, it's 145 and you've got 112 as the next highest averaging player. Now, even if you might say that we'll get some kind of pop scores over the first 3 rounds, you might say that's 120 average, but you also need to be sure that you've picked them. So we've kind of seen, I think Charlie Rowbottom a couple of years ago kind of started that hot to begin the year at that 120 mark. And that's still 20 points down every single week on what Marinoff is capable of. I think she's a must-have, and we'll talk about it later. I think there's enough value in this line, but also in other lines to justify picking her to kind of make the structure work around someone who takes up like more than 10% of the salary cap. She's 1.878 million. It's insane.
It's truly like an unworldly average and an unworldly price to be seeing. I think let's start with the very simple question, is she going to do it again? Because I can't see a world where she goes 145 again.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where surely she doesn't, but what if she does? Because if she starts the year with another 190 and you don't have her, you're buggered from day one. You're not catching up. Simple as that. And so, to me, the risk of not picking her is far greater than the risk of picking her.
Yeah, particularly when you consider as well that it's the final year under their coach, Doc Clark. I don't anticipate there being many game plan changes from Adelaide to forcibly, move Noffy away from the role where she dominates with kick and she tackles as well as anyone we've ever seen at the level. I think it's the fact that she can so comfortably get away from you. If she has a big pop score in like those first 2 weeks, you'd be lucky to get her in within the first half of the season, and then you're 200 points behind comfortably on someone that I reckon most of the competition's going to have.
I love how her scoring just comes from so many sources, but there are so many ridiculous stats behind what she can do. I mean, I think at one stage last year, she had 17 tackles 3 weeks in a row. I mean, these are numbers that no one else dreams of really hitting. It's incredible. My question for you guys, though, is if we had to play devil's advocate, what is the logic in not picking Ebony Marinoff?
I mean, I think the logic is that you've basically got what is essentially $2 million players in one. So you can trade down Marinoff to another very good averaging player. You could say a Laura Gardner. You could say, even if you wanted to go a bit more expensive, like even Jazz Garner, the second highest averaging player, you're still saving 400k. It's a lot of money to be playing with on other lines that could get you a premium elsewhere. It's probably not a strategy I'm going to go for, but I can see the logic in doing it.
I think the case is more what I can probably do in my ruck line in being able to pick Mim Strom, who sits at a level that is that far above the next highest averaging ruck, that maybe then you can say, like, okay, the saturation of 100 to 115 midfielders, like let's say you're going to pick like 3 of Garner, Rowbottom, Riddell, Gardner, someone of that ilk, and then you can also have someone that we expect to be R1. I think that's the justification that you make. You can make so many other structural changes that set you up better to justify not picking Noff.
Yeah, and to hark back to what we said before, it basically comes down to whether you think Noffy's start to the year is going to be far enough above to justify it. Because if you think she's averaging even 130, that's 15 points down. If you think she's going to average that much more, it's a huge risk not to take it. If you think she's just going to drop back into the pack even with 120, maybe you're thinking, I don't want to lose all that money from a one bad score. I'm going to take the risk and go for the value elsewhere.
Speaking of runs, first 3 games of the year, St Kilda, Geelong, GWS. And for anyone who might want a little, refresher, 172 for Ebony Marinoff against St Kilda. Now, only 107 against Geelong, and then GWS 177. 177 points. So 2 of the teams that she's playing in her first 3 games, she scored over 170.
That's bonkers.
Lads, quick question for you. How many people have ever scored over 170 in AFLW Fantasy?
Twice in a season, and both of those scores weren't even her highest score for the year.
Correct. This is the problem. You go up against her, and she's just got 2 really good teams early. And then you go, okay, she's got Brisbane later on. Her games against Brisbane, she had 135 and 134. And then she's got Hawthorn, I think, after that. And, that's when she scored 191.
And I think the thing about it is you say, Geelong, she only scored 107. That was in the final game of the season when they were kind of easing their way towards the finals. Other than that, she hasn't dropped below 120, and she's only dropped below 120 in the first game. Sorry, that was against Port Adelaide.
That was 121.
121.
Yeah.
And if you take that away, she hasn't dropped below 130.
She's a freak.
She scored 2 scores under 130.
Nice to see our devil's advocate skills have lasted a really long time and haven't devolved into just go, my God. Because look at these big numbers.
Because you look at the
big number.
You look at the numbers, and it's really hard to ignore. It's really hard. I think the pure devil's advocate is it was an all-time season, W award-winning season. Even if you drop that back down to 130, she's still shaving off probably 200k at least. That's probably your biggest argument to not do it. But gee, those numbers really make it hard to think against picking her.
Yeah. I think I can make a pretty convincing case that she's going to average under 140. I think it's so rare that anyone has a best and fairest season like she had and is going to keep up those standards. I think there's going to be some regression.
Yeah.
If we look at what Monconti did after 2023, she dropped 10 points on her average. It's a very common thread going back. The problem is she going to drop enough that at any stage through the season, you're going to be able to bring her in? Because I think unless you're going from Ghana, you're not going to have any sort of jumping point.
Exactly. And I said it early on, which is if she starts in that sort of form, if she goes 170 against St Kilda that first week, and you don't have her as captain, you're probably already out of the running. It's as simple as that. It's a big risk to take.
Yeah, it does sound like as a trio of 3 here, we are very confidently leaning towards picking Ebony Marinoff to start the year, but we do still need to have a top 5 players on this line that we see starting the year as the best 5 players. Liam, are you able to lead us off with who that number 1 player might be?
Yeah, that would be Laura Gardner, actually. No, that's a lie. It's Ebony Marinoff.
Big fan.
Ebony Marinoff at 1, and then I'll just run through my 5 because I need to talk about a couple of things. So at 2, I've got Jazz Garner. At 3, I've got Charlie Rowbottom. At 4, I've got Kiara Bowers. And at 5, I have Ash Riddell. So the thing I need to talk about, and I actually had a real hard time putting this list together because I think that there's reasonably question marks over all 4 of them. The big question for both Garner and Riddell isn't so much in what they do, it's in what North does with Ailish Sheeran. Her likely injection into the midfield at points is almost certainly going to stress on the elite rotation capabilities of Darren Crocker at North Melbourne as coach. I do wonder, though, if both players are again given advanced time to rest off the ground, probably tog in the high 70s, both that being Garner and Riddell, meaning that their averages of 112 last year and 110, 112 for Garner and 110 for Riddell, are pushed down a little bit. And I think the other thing as well is the way that Sheeran plays in the midfield. It's not a fashion that leads to as many points for her teammates. She is I'm going to make the difference type of clearance player. Whereas I would say that the reason why both Riddell and Garner are so good is that their structure at stoppage and their ability to find each other and know where the other is going to be leads to more scoring for both of them.
Yeah, Sheeran really is a just get the ball out of the area type of player, which probably doesn't suit the getting the ball to Jazz Garner all the time, but I mean, they're still pretty good players, those North midfielders.
And you add in the fact that Garner has been announced as captain, apparently, like in, doing some pre-interview stuff, has rocked up to training looking like extra jacked as well. I think it's hard to go against someone who's so consistently been above 110, or at least in like the top 3 or 4 midfielders, to push her off 2. Then it kind of leads into the kind of 3 and 4, which is Rowbottom and Bowers, who I had a hard time putting in between the 2 North mids. Rowbottom, I've gone on the fact that she was averaging over 115, nearly at 120. So about 119 she was averaging in her first 7 games. She then gets hurt. Now, I can't remember exactly what the injury was, but she was definitely banged up in that game she had in the 7th or 8th game against Hawthorn. And then from there, she didn't hit quite the same height. So she's averaged 106.4 for the season, priced therefore at 1.377 mil. I think she's closer to 118 than she is 106. The big question for her is, what does Reece Shaw do to the game plan at the Gold Coast Suns?
Yeah, it's definitely a large unknown, that one. I'm a big Rowbottom fan, so I can see her going at this 118 average that you're talking about. It's hard to pick someone with that big an unknown, because I can see games where Whitford and Lucy Single sort of take bigger charge if he tries to play a less defensive game style, and that would potentially take ball away from her.
It definitely could.
Something that's been a real problem for the Gold Coast over the last few years as well is their huge reliance on Charlie Rowbottom. So you'd expect Reece Shaw would be looking to get a few more midfield contributors in there. They've brought in Lily Mithen. We know Lucy Single and Claudia Whitford are good young midfielders as well. I still think that an average of 110 is definitely in the picture, but whether she can push up to that 118, 120 is definitely going to be something that we'll need to see how the midfield shapes up in the preseason.
Yeah, I've got big eyes on both the preseason and the match simulation for Gold Coast. Not so much for what Rowbottom scores. I just want to see how much they rely on post centre bounce stoppages in their game plan, because that was something that was so clear watching Gold Coast over the last couple of seasons. It was try and force those stoppages and then allow Rowbottom to go to work, extricate to Single and Whitford, and then make things happen from there. If they continue with that game plan, I think that if anyone has the trajectory towards Ebony Marinoff, I'd say that it is Charlie Rowbottom. Like, she has that tackling capability. She has that strength at stoppage. It's just going to be, is she going to be allowed to play that role? And is that role going to flourish under a new coach that we really don't know much about at a women's footy level? We know that he did some stuff for the men's side, but I'm hesitant to apply any of that analysis to what he might do for the AFLW list.
Yeah, I think he's a very good coach, and so completely different team, different squad. He's going to build a game plan around what he has and not what he's done in the past. So I think that's a fair call. I think your fourth player, though, in Kiara Bowers is a fascinating one, because I couldn't tell you what she's going to average this season. I think there's a huge realm of possibilities of what she could score. So I'm keen to hear your take on where you think she's going to fall average-wise.
This one also, again, just an absolute brutal exercise trying to pick. So she's priced at base, I think it's low 80s. But so for those that have not played AFLW Fantasy for a long time and unaware of the mysticism around Kiara Bowers, she was as good as, if not, well, she was as good as Ebony Marinoff was, kind of era adjusted, let's say. She had basically never averaged under 100 points. She's also a tackle monster, averaged 14.6 in Season 7, and had, up until that point, the highest ever score of all time at 184. Then in Season 8, she's banged up, she's got some knee issues, she only plays half the games in the season, still averages 111, and 12.2 tackles. And then she misses Season 9 with pregnancy. Now, since she's left, the midfield group has not so much changed as just added a million other players at Fremantle. So they added basically a whole new line, particularly though with Gabby Newton and Ash McCarthy, who came in and proved themselves to be more than capable fantasy scorers and footballers. I think that was the most successful version of Fremantle I'd seen for several years. The question then becomes, is Kiara Bowers going to play in the midfield every week? And if she is she going to have that same volume share of points and tackles this year? I was hesitant to bet against her because even when she's been injured, she still averaged 111. But I think there's questions to be had about, is she capable of getting back up to those heights again?
Yeah, and to me, at the price she is, I think it's a very easy risk to take. If she was priced around that 100 mark, you'd be thinking, well, it's a bit iffy. But given she's priced, as you said, around that 80 mark, I think the way Kiara Bowers plays, she'll make that easily. She'll do that in probably tackles alone, basically. So I think it's a pretty straightforward one. Even if you don't think she's going to be quite a top 5 midfielder, I think she's a pretty good player to bank on just based on the price.
Yeah, I do appreciate that those numbers you were giving us as well. When you say they're error adjusted, that's before you would take into account the game's 17% longer now than it was back then. Like, these are crazy numbers
More
that
tackles.
she was putting up in the past. Yeah, it's one that if she can find a way to coexist with Ash McCarthy in particularly, with that tackling prowess she has, I think that's going to be the one which is a little interesting to see. But if she can get anywhere near what she was doing in the past, it'll be interesting.
Gabby Newton, I think, had 20-something on tackles against Essendon or Adelaide. I can't remember. One of the finals, she nearly broke the tackle record in a game. So I'm wondering if it's just a game plan thing, and so we're happy to launch in. The one player that I'm reticent to miss, I've already mentioned her, but Laura Gardner, she's the kind of lucky, the sixth place player, the one who I was most agonised over putting in. She's priced at 101, so 1.31 million. She had an injury towards the back end of last year. She, I think it was a hand injury, really looked down on form after that, had some lower game time. Last 3 average of only 91, but outside of that, she was averaging 109 on the season. So I think this is, again, someone with some real good baked-in value to start the year. The big question for her is she going to be able to score as well as she had in a midfielder where Sophia Hurley has broken out? Or if Sophia Hurley is going to play in there full-time, because I think that that's another player who's capable of going at that 90 mark, and it's often difficult to have multiple 90-plus players coexist in the same team. But I still think that there's value in there. Wouldn't begrudge anyone from picking her. And again, it's just a difficulty in projecting perfectly what she'll average.
Yeah, I think there's enough teams around the AFLW. I mean, you've got North with a couple averaging over 110. Gold Coast had a couple players with Whitford dominating as well. I think it's very possible. But you've also got Chloe Malloy trying to break back into that midfield as well, coming back from her ACL injury. There's a lot of parts moving.
I think it's, and you raise a fair point, I probably should have phrased it better. I think it's more the fact that Hurley and Gardner play similar ways and occupy similar places at stoppage. Whereas if you talk about, like, you compare Garner and Riddell, they play very different roles, and you compare Rowbottom and Whitford, they play very different roles. So I think that's probably where my hesitancy more comes from, in that overlap in the way that they play. And they've got to try and fit in one of their defensive midfielders at Sydney, which has typically been, well, last season it was Tanya Kennedy most of the time. So there's just some like shuffling that needs to be done that I'm not sure on.
Yeah, I'd also like to bring up that they've got another key player returning in Ali Morfitt, whose primary strength seems to be getting clearances in her own right.
Yeah, it's a tough one to predict. Like, I do have questions about Ali Morfitt's, availability, whether or not it's a sustainable game style for winning. Like, she's only played for 9 games across the last 2 years. There's a lot of questions to be had at Sydney, and a lot of scoring possibly there for someone able to take it.
I've got to be honest, I don't think any of this is particularly inspiring for someone who's thinking of going against picking Marinoff to start the season. That almost every player on that list comes with a massive asterisk. But
maybe it's just the internal, the person that struggles to really put a finger on exactly how I feel and trying to find negatives for everything. Like, there's negatives for all of these players possibly. Maybe I'm being too harsh. I think there's definitely 2 or 3 players in there that kind of walk straight into my team.
Yeah. There's definitely a few of those that I'm looking at for my team as well. But we've gone with an exercise here of trying to find an undervalued premium who is not one of those top 5 or 6 players that we've just mentioned. So, Will, I think I'll get you to start off with this one. If you had to pick an undervalued premium to try and challenge into that top 6 list, who would you be taking?
Yeah, the player I've picked for this one is Ella Roberts, West Coast midfielder, averaged 92.3 last year. So a little bit below the pack, but I rate Ella Roberts so highly as a player. She is a player that I can see following that trajectory up into the 100, averaging midfielders very easily. Does it all, takes marks, kicks goals. I think she's a player that if you're wanting a little bit of extra value, Ella Roberts is a player that I'm really interested in.
Let's just hope and pray that she can kick straight, because I reckon she leaves 6 to 7 points a week on the table with her inaccuracy, which did improve last season, but she still kicked far more behinds than she has goals. Definitely think that there's 100 averaging player in there if she can tidy that up.
Yeah, no, 100%. Absolute star of the competition in the making. And I do appreciate that this year West Coast have gotten one of the best fixtures. They're one of 2 teams that don't play North Melbourne, the reigning premiers, Brisbane, the runner-up, or Hawthorn, the soon-to-be premiers of the AFLW. So a very handy trio to not be playing in 2025.
Yeah, and they've got Gold Coast and St Kilda in their first 3 games.
Very positive start. How about you, Liam? Who's your undervalued premium coming in?
It's Georgie Prasparkas. Georgie P, former top pick in the draft. Averaged 73 last year, but I think we all agree that she's 95 averaging capability. Definitely afflicted by injury during the season. Kind of started slowly, then got injured. Really didn't look herself when she kind of came back. Highest score last year of only 96, but given that in the year prior, she'd had multiple scores over 100. She's someone who, priced where she is, which is, of course, I have it right in front of me, 948k. So priced at that average of 73. I think she's got 20 points of value. I'm more than happy to launch straight into her to start the year.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to get away from Georgie Prasparkas. I think, with she and Rowbottom often compared, starting around the same time, I can see, her almost catching her up in this one season because she's got the fantasy chops about her game. Very impressive player. I've actually gone down a very similar route. I've picked Georgie's older sister, Madison Prasparkas, for my player. I want to know your take on this, Liam, as an Essendon fan, but Priced at 1.161 million this year, she averaged 84.5 in 2024, which was, I think she would be disappointed with her outfit last year. I think the Bombers had a tough fixture and they didn't quite perform to the level they would want to. Just the year before, she'd averaged 96.5, and that's including a couple games where she'd been tagged very intensely. She just couldn't get the 100 scores last year. She seemed to be falling short quite a bit. I think this year the Bombers have got a much stronger fixture to start the year. They start with the Giants, then the Eagles and Richmond, and I can see that being a very strong start to the year for her, potentially a couple hundreds right off the get-go.
My only query, though, and this is something that you'll hear more about in our Essendon episode, is on game style for Essendon. And I think that what we really saw change last year was the volume of marks and ball control that Lauren Wood was getting the Bombers to do. And Maddie is not a high mark player. She doesn't drop particularly low in defence very often, and she's not got a massive amount of height. She's good at marking inside 50 because quite often the ball is kind of dropping from high, and her body work to be able to clear space to get to the drop of the ball is really good, but I don't know about it as much in transition. So I do wonder if she can get back up to that 96, 97 ceiling again. She just kind of settled a little too comfortably, quite often had games as well where she just didn't have as many tackles, and that probably also impacted her scoring. Like if the Bombers are going for high marks in transition ball control, they're not trying to create repeat stoppages. And I think that a Bombers team that is going to be lacking probably a ruck to start the year, I'd be shocked if they moved away from that again.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I just, I feel like they're the sort of team that, well, she's the sort of player that just, you can't really keep her down for that long. I feel like she's, if I'm the Bombers, I'm not necessarily changing my game style to suit her, but I think she'll find a way to work in whatever system she's in.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
a big
fair.
believer in the player. Yeah. But look, there's a few honourable mentions that we have. I think there's a couple players over at the Giants that were very close to making this list. Elise Parker is priced at $1.2 million to start the year, averaged 93 last year. And I think really the return of Beck Beeson, who's another player we'll need to talk about, I think in that first half of the year, the two of them were still trying to work out how to work together. And in the second half of the year, that's when Elise Parker really came to the fore, and she went over 100 to finish that last half of the year. So she's one that I can see getting off to a good start in 2025. And same with Beck Beeson, who, that's a really, really impressive comeback year for her. I'm thinking that those two are very good options.
Yeah, it's just going to be another question on balance. I think trying to add in Zali Goldsworthy, who I really think was down on output last year, is the question that I have coming into this season. But we're obviously talking mids now, not forwards, but it's a question that's why they're kind of not in my first team.
Yeah, it's an extremely tight rotation, so it'd be interesting to see if that changes at all now that Bernasconi's in his fourth season leading that squad. But another player that we previously couldn't talk about because she was a forward, now coming into midfield status only, is Kate Hoare. My question to you guys is, as a player that previously you would only really look at as a forward because she is far and away the top averager on that line, can you still pick her with a midfield status only?
I think you can. I think it's an interesting one because Melbourne's the list in transition. I think I like her better closer to goal kicking goals, to be completely honest. And I think it would be a much simpler pick if she was a forward. It's not a player that I'm probably leaning towards, but I can see the merit in it.
So my thinking, though, is she averaged nearly 100 in the final 3 games of last season, and that was on high CBA. She was basically 80 plus for the second half of the season, and they're adding back in Taylor Harris in the forward line. They are again a list in transition. They're trying to replace Lily Mithen in that midfield group, and I think a core of Hoare and Hanks leading, and Liv Purcell kind of leading that midfield group. It would be where I'm looking to build my list from at Melbourne. So I think that she's probably closer to that 90s app number than she is priced at 83, I think. Hang on, what's she priced at, actually? Just chat amongst yourselves for a second whilst I get that. She's priced at 85.
No, it's an interesting one. I agree. I think they've probably got enough forward presence now. I think she can be pushed into that midfield. And I think that really the start to their season is what I'm interested in. If I do think this is a year where, because we've got so many undervalued options, I think we're going to be able to afford a lot of very, very talented players. And so I am looking at fixture a little more closely than I have in the past. And if I look at Melbourne's start to the season, they've got the Bulldogs in round 1, St Kilda round 2, and then Collingwood round 3. I think that there is a chance for someone to go very, very big. I don't know if it's Kate Hoare, who's one that I'm looking at, or if we jump down to a slightly cheaper set of options here, looking at our mid-priced options, my choice for the mid-priced player is Olivia Purcell, who only played 4 games in 2024 because right at the start of the season, she unfortunately suffered a fractured cheekbone, something Liam knows all too well, and only ended up coming in at the end of the season, playing 4 games for an average of 71.3. I think with a full preseason, the longer games, I think there's a good chance that she can go over 85 and can really sort of start putting together larger scores, because I think having those runs of ceiling scores is something that she's not really been able to do for long periods across a whole season, but when she does, she's going to put on a lot of cash and quickly.
The big question is, can she move away from a handball happy game style? You know, the best kick to handball ratio she's had, in her 4 seasons at Melbourne is 0.95, which means that she is almost always getting more handballs than kicks, and she's, not exactly a particularly high mark player, and then her tackles were down last season, but I think you can make the case that they should be up again this year, just given what they're trying to do in that midfield.
Yeah, I think if I broke my face, I would be tackling less, just by instinct.
I'm going to avoid commenting on that because it's slightly too raw for me, even 2 years after I did the same injury. I just wonder if, she can put it together for 4 quarters. She has those elite bursts, particularly if there's like rolling stoppages. She's very good at finding her hands at the bottom of stoppage and extricating. It's just, can she put it together for longer? Can she become a higher mark player, a more kick dominant player, or a more tackle dominant player to be able to kind of justify something closer to that 90s? Whereas typically, she's probably been someone at that high 70s, low 80s mark.
Who's your mid-priced option then, Liam? Who are we looking at from a little bit of a cheaper price point?
We're looking at Gabrielle Newton. I've already kind of mentioned Fremantle, so I won't belabor the point, but she's priced cheaply, but she had an epic run to end the season. So in her final 3 games, she averaged 106, and then in her last 5, she averaged 97.4. That is comfortably outpacing her 75.8 price tag. So she's below $1 million, and she has that kind of capacity, and I think she had over 20 tackles in the game at one point. The big question will be, is she able to do the same thing with Bowers there? Because she has the positional flexibility to play forward and back as needed, she could be a switch that get flipped if the mid-balance isn't working with Turbo and Stannett back in there. But I think on the whole, she showed a ceiling that we'd never seen from her before. She saw an extremely high CBA role and looked to come into her own at the back end of the year. I'm very bullish on starting Newton.
Ooh, interesting. Because I would have thought,
very interesting.
If you've got East, Miller, Stannett, Turbo, there's a lot of players that you've got to fit into a midfield that's already performing quite well. I worry that Newton's the sort of player who's got the flexibility to go elsewhere.
I want to make it clear, it's pending what I see in the kind of pre-season reports and match sim, practice match and whatever. But when she got to the point where she played at basically a full season in the midfield, at the back end, she was an elite scorer. She was a top, echelon, top 5% level scorer. And it was built off the kind of things that top scorers have, which is high number of kicks and tackles. That is a great recipe. It's just the balance for that midfield group that I have questions about.
Yeah, certainly no denying that she's a talented player and one for the fantasy game. Will, I'm going to jump to you. I have left you to last on this line because, quite frankly, I don't want to hear anything about this player after last season. But please tell us who your mid-priced option is.
The player I've picked is Brianna Davey, who has been a fantasy boon and also a fantasy bust for the past 3 seasons in a row. She had a terrible year when it came to injury last year. Suffered a concussion in the double rounds last year, which ruined a lot of seasons, mine included. And then also finished the year with another injury. It was a shocking run for a player who is a very, very talented player and can average up around that 90 mark. So she's right down in terms of priced around about 60, I believe it is. And I think there's a lot of value there, but I can also understand why people are a little bit scared, because last year when we said she was a great underpriced option, it didn't really work out for everyone.
I very sarcastically commented when we did the Collingwood episode, she's priced at 68.8. Over under on games played this season, 6.8. She's someone who's definitely been a consistent thorn in our sides in terms of rocking up each and every week. Not through her own fault, just by an unfortunate run of injuries, but given also the way that she plays, she is a crash and bash operator, and that is often conducive to more injuries. So that's my biggest concern about Brie Davey is availability.
Yeah, very understandable. And she's handed over the captaincy this year to focus on basically getting her body right, which gives me some hope. If she can get back to full fitness and play a full year, there's a player there that should be able to average at least 10 points more than her current price tag, which is 68. So I think there's value there. The biggest question is, once again, the durability of that pick and whether people have gotten over the fact that her concussion pretty much ruined a lot of people's fantasy seasons last year.
Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of value, so I can very much see why players would be tempted into jumping on Brie Davey. But yeah, tough call. I think availability is a big one. And look, when we go through our honourable mentions, there's a couple players here that I think have also had some availability issues in the past. Players that we've been talking about are Ola O'Dwyer over at the Lions. Amy Gaylor is one that we've been looking at closely. But Georgia Patrikios and Janome Anderson, 2 St Kilda midfield listed players here that I think come with a lot of value. Patrikios in particular due to her missing pretty much all of last season. Is anyone interested in the Saints midfield?
No.
Liam definitely is. I know he loves St Kilda.
No. Definitely not.
They've got so many cooks in the kitchen at the moment that we'll need to see how they fit in, because they've basically brought in the offseason 3 established midfielders. They've brought in Nikki Barr, they've brought in Charlotte Baskarin.
And they brought in Amber Clark as well.
But basically they've just got a whole lot of players that can run through there. And we know that T. Smith's a great player in there. We know that Jamie Lambert's a good player in there. Liv Vesely is apparently back fit now. I just don't really know how it's all going to shape up and where her role will be, whether it's off cross half forward, on the wing, through the midfield. I'd like to see where she's playing in the preseason first.
You're forgetting the fact that they also added Alana G, and who else have they got to try and fit into the... Oh, Nicola Zenos, who should have been a midfielder, and we've seen her be a midfielder before. That's the problem with St Kilda. There's just an abundance of options, and they can't ever appear to pick a consistent group. So I think Janome Anderson showed a little bit of scoring potential. She had some real burst quarters at the back end of the year, kind of thrown in the midfield. Loves a tackle, averaged 9.5 tackles in the VFLW at the beginning of this year. So I definitely think there's a scoring player there. She'd probably be someone, if there was a draft platform, I'd be throwing a dart at. I just think that it's going to be tough to justify, given how many premiums we're probably going to look to jam into our midfield in this format.
No, it's fair enough, because I think at the end of the day, there is a lot of value. So I think we've got to be pretty settled on, the players that we're bringing in that have the top line talent. And I think it's probably just a good time now to talk about some of our cash cow options, because there are some very, very impressive draftees and rookie price players on this line. I might go first on this one, because the hottest player in the AFLW draft last year was Ash Centra. She averaged 111 in the Coates League, And she is the only player that I can think of that at any stage has actually outscored Ebony Marinoff's top score. Last year in the Coates League, had a 47 disposal game with 192 fantasy points from the calculations we've done. It is just a crazy number, a number one talent who, as far as I can tell at Collingwood, is going to plug straight into that team. I have no worries about her making the best 21 to start the season. I mean, is this a player that we must have in our fantasy sides?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. It's from the sounds of it. Where do we think she's going to play? Just for those who haven't listened to our summary at the Pies.
Starts at half forward, pushes up into midfield, and will be electric wherever she plays.
Yeah.
I think probably still gets some
much
midfield time too.
Yeah, no, she's a massive talent, and I can't wait to see her on the big stage. How about yourself, Will? Who's the cash cow that you've been looking at to start this season?
Yeah, there's a few interesting ones. This draft looks like it's going to be an absolute bumper, and a player who I've decided to have a look at is Sophie Mackay, sister of famous Jono cash cow Abby Mackay, who is now the captain. Sophie Mackay averaged 27 disposals in the under 18s, but what I quite like about Sophie Mackay is she averaged those disposals while playing in a mid-forward role, not pure midfield, which means that she's already scoring well in the role she's likely to play coming into AFLW level, which is starting probably outside of that centre bounce combination. So I quite like that about her. She's priced at 396,000, so slightly cheaper than an Ash Centra type. I think she's a player that will probably play early on and can score reasonably well as well.
Who's your player, Liam?
It is the owner of the best name, I think possibly in any Australian sport ever, and it's Zippy Fish, the 404k midfielder from the Sydney Swans. She is the full package. She is extremely athletic, extremely good with ball in hand, fast, which thank God she was quick. Imagine naming a child Zippy Fish and they were slow. That would be a cruel, cruel punishment.
Be far from ideal.
And so she's played multiple seasons in the Waffle W. I think she's been best on ground in a grand final there. She's averaged 96 points per game in her final season at Waffle W level. The thing that I really like is, having talked to Lucy McAvoy, it does sound like she will be a halfback midfielder. And given the points available to like anyone who wants to take it at Sydney playing off halfback, given the fact that Ella Heads has now gone to Port Adelaide, I would not be shocked if she is someone that gets a share of those points. Particularly considering as well, like Scott Gowans has shown himself to be someone that gives those kind of scoring roles to rookies. Like Ella Heads was given a great scoring role in her first season. Molly Eastman got the same in her first season. There's no adversity. He's not adverse to giving that role to someone who is young, and I think that Zippy's ball use is going to be in massive need across that half-back line. So if she is playing there, I think she's someone who could immediately score like 60 points per game, which would be a great spot, particularly if you're running her on your bench or in your utility.
Yeah, I think when we talk about the Swans half-backs as well, they're a team that were probably guilty of overusing the ball on that line end of last year. And so I suppose there's a balance here between, are they going to do it again, which will be good for her? Are they going to make a focused effort not to do that? But maybe she's one of the players that they put the ball in the hands of so that she can break those lines. It'll be interesting to see. I'm pretty excited to see Zippy Fish in action. There are a few more honourable mentions that I think we need to tick off. One is Molly O'Hare over at the Demons. We're talking about them kind of refreshing their squad a little bit, and this is a player who is an absolute tackling beast history. I think she's averaged 80 at the Waffle last year. And then, of course, there is India Rashid, which is not a name that I was expecting to see here. But Liam, do you want to tell us a little bit about India?
So this is one where it's a big if, because she's gone to Adelaide. So it's a really tough team to break into. Like, we've already seen that last year. Like, Brooke Boylow, for anyone that played, has insane numbers in the Sample W. Just couldn't get a game. India Rashid averaged 108.8 in the Sandfield W last season and 80.8 points per game in 2023. So there is serious scoring pedigree there if she gets a game. I expect that she'll get some time across half forward, which is likely to new to her scoring, but it's if we hear the faintest word, this is someone with serious points per minute capability and would be willing to throw a dart at. Basically, as soon as we were here, midfield time, I'd be all there for it.
Yeah, almost sounds like a potential downgrade option later in the season.
Yeah, that's fair call.
I think that's a fair shout, actually. Good to have options presenting. Hopefully we keep that going all year long. Well, I think that's all the players we're going to run through today. But before we wrap up, I'm really curious about how much money we are spending on this line, because realistically, this is where the high-scoring fantasy players are. This is where we're going to get a large portion of our points. Most of our captains are going to come from this line. How many players are we expecting to actually pay up for in the midfield, and how many rookies are we going to be starting, particularly on field?
I've currently got one on field, but then there is a 500k gap between the rookie and my fourth midfielder. So I'm not really dabbling in any mid-priced areas whatsoever at the moment. I'm kind of going pretty close to the top pretty quickly.
Yeah, same here. I'm thinking Ash Centra on field. I think she's a superstar in the making. And then basically just sitting some underpriced premiums below the one and only Ebony Marinoff.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see, because I am currently doing the same, but the temptation to run a fifth fully priced midfielder and have someone like Ash Centra on the bench, it seems like a waste of someone with that potential, but also there's a lot of points to be scored.
I just want to say one thing as well. Like, we probably did a disservice on the rookies. I think that there's some 300Ks that we can dabble in. I think Kaylee Kavanagh has been someone who averaged massive numbers as a junior, missed last season with an ACL, so it's kind of a fake rookie this year. She's playing midfield. I think she's someone with capability. And then, not 300k, but Erone Fitzpatrick is someone that's apparently looking excellent at Carlton, playing again a midfield role. And then Sofra O'Connell, I think is her name, another Irish recruit. Shifra, that's right. She is someone as well that is getting massive plaudits on what they can do. Will probably get game time very, very quickly. 300k mid would be another that it would almost be better if they don't debut and becomes a kind of downgrade target. I felt bad for not having mentioned them, because I'm looking at my team and how much I'm spending. Like, I've only got high draft picks as my rookies. Like, I've got Centra, I've got Fish, I'm currently looking at O'Hare as well. Like, I'm spending over 400k in every one of those spots. Like, that's a decent investment, and there are some 300k options that are worth picking.
Which is why Sophie Mackay, great option, 4k less than 400k.
Wow.
Wow.
No, I think we do seem to have an abundance of rookies this year. I can also see players like, Lucia Painter over at the Eagles is probably going to get a look in at some point during the season. I think it's going to be an embarrassment of riches, and I do hope that we do have some left over when it comes to the later parts of the season. I mean, even Heidi Talbot is one that I think, Will, you've been pretty hot on this preseason over at the Gold Coast, only 316k.
Yeah, heaps of options.
All right, well, if you had to look at your team right now, and I'm aware that the season still has a long, long way to go, but if you had to pick a person in your midfield that is the most likely to be sticking around all the way until round one, I want to know who that person might be. Liam?
Ebony Marinoff. Next.
Yeah.
You know what? Give us one that's not Ebony Marinoff, I reckon, Liam.
Oh, that's tough. Let's go Charlie Rowbottom. But even then, I think there's a bit of risk there too.
Yeah, no, some of these higher priced captaincy options, they're hard to avoid when you've got that sort of double opportunity on the line. Will, how about yourself?
Yeah, for me, I've decided that this is a year to Bowers. So I'm definitely going to look at Kiara Bowers. At that price, I think it's too hard to pass up.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a shame that Mel couldn't be on this episode just to heap more praise on her team's namesake. So that's Bowers down to me. I love the reference you've got there. I think for myself, I'm looking more at the rookies, and I think Ash Centra is one that, whether she's on the field or on the bench, she's 100% going to be in my side. No question about it.
I would just like it known that I didn't say Bowers or Centra, in part because I knew that's who you were both picking, and Charlie Rowbottom was the next highest ranked out of the options that I've gone to pick to start the year. Because I think those three make up the skeleton. Like, I think that if you're picking a team from scratch, they would be in the first half dozen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there, Liam. I think those three are to me, the obvious three to build your team around in the midfield if you're looking for a place to start. So I guess, in fairness to Liam, given I asked him to pick another one, I think the player that I'm looking at the moment as my extra player to pick would probably be Georgie Prasparkas. I love the price point there. I think she's got 20 points worth of upside, and I'm just a big Georgie Prasparkas fan as a Geelong supporter, so great pick.
No, it's exciting stuff. I'm keen to see, once we get closer to the season, what some of these ownership percentages look like, because it's going to be fascinating to see. I think it's going to be a big decision point across the season. Who has Ebony Marinoff, who doesn't, and how does that affect our side scoring? Because I think, there's a lot of things that could happen early in the season that could make that decision either clearly the right choice or clearly the wrong choice.
Plus, we all remember the Kiara Bowers laid out of all that fun that we had last year. So,
yeah,
well, 2 years ago rather.
Little bit
so
of a
you never know.
Right back then, yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, well, hey, knock on wood. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. I think that's going to do us so on this episode of Free Kick, talking about the midfielders. Let us know if you have anyone that you think we have missed out on talking about, because I do think that there are some interesting players on this line at a lot of different price points. So keen to hear your thoughts. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at FreeKickWPod. You can also follow us, Free Kick, on Instagram, again, at FreeKickWPod. Yeah, anything to say, guys, before we wrap up this one?
Spend up for Ebony Marinoff.
Preach.
I guess, everyone, we'll catch you soon. This episode is coming out on a Friday, so we will see you next week. Looking forward to talking all things forwards.
See ya.
See ya.